Let's get to the AgNow weather forecast. Matt Makins here. A number of hazards on the way. Kind of the most dominating feature of the weather pattern continues to be the heaviness of rainfall in a lot of locations. So let's break down the next week to 10 days and where the hazards are. In the very near term, heavy rainfall for the northern high plains, Montana, the Dakotas. Also heavy rainfall stretching from central and northern Texas through Oklahoma, and that bullseye goes all the way out towards Pittsburgh and even DC with heavy rainfall. Beyond that point, we're still going to be watching out for this region, kind of the central Mississippi, if you will, the central U.S., and that's going to be risks of more heavy rainfall from the 25th to the 27th. Aside from rainfall and that heavy precip, we also have to worry about severe weather. More on that in a moment. We're also watching out for a different hazard. That's heat and wind here across the Four Corners region into the high plains of Colorado, New Mexico, into parts of Texas. A combination of warmer than normal temperatures, sometimes setting records, plus wind creates high fire danger in that drought area. And it's also expanding that drought area very quickly, I'm afraid. Beyond these hazards shown here, let's look at the severe thunderstorm risks. Of course, every day they kind of merge around. A couple of bullseyes Friday here, Saturday, focusing on Kansas and Oklahoma. Then we get into Sunday, and now we're focusing on Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri. Every day that these outlooks are updated, they shift around a little bit, but they give you a general sense of the most likely areas that could see some damaging thunderstorms. To the best of my ability, I kind of plot these next 3 days on my social media feeds. Since videos, who knows when you're watching? Maybe you're watching well after the fact, but social media is a good place to stay up to date on those severe weather threats from day to day. Let's get into the soil discussion, and this is a different soil moisture map than I've shown you recently. Really, there are multiple products out there for soil moistures, and each of the products may use something different, like maybe a satellite sensing gravity, and that can tell you soil moistures. There's some modeling that uses soil moisture sensors to produce the maps. This is just a different one. I tend to lean toward this one more so than others. It has some fits, especially around the Great Lakes, but by and large, it's a pretty good product. So we're looking at 0 to 100 centimeters, and where we've seen improvements or where we're having saturated soils are the blue shades. So we've seen quite an improvement here across the upper Midwest. And remember, in some of the past videos with the soil moisture maps, we worried about Minnesota and parts of Iowa. There's still drought there. Don't get me wrong. Long term, we still need to add additional precip, but we've done better here over the short term. The near surface soil moistures have come up tremendously. We need that soil to continue to penetrate that moisture, get it down deeper into the ground. But we've seen some notable improvements here across corn country. A little bit drier in pockets of Indiana and Ohio. Again, an area that has a lot of surface moisture too. We had some delays to planting and things. Where we've seen kind of dominating drought signal is here in Kansas, especially the Southwest, now merging into central Kansas, panhandles of Oklahoma and Texas. We've also had kind of this longer term, regardless of product, we've seen this longer term soil moisture issue in that region. Now we're starting to see some growing soil moisture issues for far southern Texas as well as Florida. These kind of products, they can range in say, duration of time or time period. So kind of the most recent snapshot is this. If you want to look at long-term soil moisture deficits, like over 3, 6, 9, 12 months, that's when we look at the Drought Monitor, a product I'm sure you're familiar with. But this is more of a snapshot in time. Speaking of time, let's run through a timeline of the storms as they develop and scoot across the country over the next 7 to 10 days. As we go throughout Memorial Weekend, we're going to have to watch out for active weather across the central U.S. Obviously, we highlight that as a heavy precip area as well as a severe thunderstorm risk area. As you go beyond this weekend into next, we get some quieter periods off to the west. The storm flow begins to subside a little bit. Once you get to I-25, kind of the cutoff of the Rockies, and go east of, that's when we'll watch for daily thunderstorms to pop up and scoot off to the east. And as they go off to the east, still a heavy rainfall threat and a severe thunderstorm threat. So by and large, we're turning our frequent big soak and rain systems that we've had over the last couple of weeks. As we get into June, we're going to turn more into what we classically think of with severe weather season. The thunderstorms that pop up, they're damaging with tornadoes and hail. They merge into a big line of wind and heavy rainfall as those complexes race across the plains. And that's what we'll look for periodically over the next 7 to 10 days. In terms of total moisture on the way, we have a couple of bullseyes to talk about. I kind of already alluded to the dryness of the west, the lower storm frequency. We have a lot of water coming into parts of Manitoba, as well as Saskatchewan, as well as Alberta and BC, as well as off to the eastern provinces too. A lot of rainfall coming into central Texas. It does work its way into the Panhandle. We also have some water coming into the Panhandle of Oklahoma to help some of that soil moisture issues we just talked about. Here's that bullseye up to the north. Let me fly that map in. And we're looking at this bullseye here. So this is back into corn country. Here's Des Moines, Milwaukee, and we're down toward Bloomington. In that triangular area, if you will, we're going to be looking at 2.5 to 3 to perhaps even 4-inch rainfall totals. Of course, it depends on the isolated nature of thunderstorms and things, but just generally looking, we have a soggy setup coming into that area. And remember this bullseye, which is part of the reason why I'm highlighting it now? Northeastern Iowa. Such a tremendous drought over the last several months, several years really, but several months where we started hearing about the numbers about, some of the driest counties in more than 100 years were in that part of Iowa. So it's nice to see them getting a lot of water. Perhaps a little too much too quickly in some cases, but at least it's water. And there we have the bullseye down in central Texas. There's Abilene, and around Abilene we're expecting a couple to several inches of rainfall there as well. I live in the Rockies, so I'm used to snow and snow season, but we're running out of snow season here, aren't we, quickly? Here's the snowfall map. Kind of dismal for the states, doing better up in the Canadian Rockies and coastal areas of BC. But back to the hazards map again, worried about the heat down across the south. Let's see if that subsides beyond the next week to 10 days. So as we look weekly here, your weekly outlooks will start off with temperatures. Kind of the next week to 10 days is represented here with the heat moving into Texas, cooler temperatures up to the north, and watch as that cooler pocket expands down to the south and kind of hangs out over the central and eastern states. So the extreme heat we've talked about, a lot of the record temperatures over the last 10, 20 days or so for the far south, it does cool. It moderates a little bit compared to the average. What about moisture at that same time? There's the bullseyes of that heavy moisture over the next week. Next week into early June, we're worried about the central plains, perhaps getting some water into the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma, that is. As we get into June, still tracking moisture and look at the prevalent areas, kind of those high plains into the central plains. So the storm frequency may be shrinking down, becoming less frequent, but that doesn't mean the precip that's been favoring the central U.S. is going to stop anytime soon. That's a look at this week's AgNow Weather Report. Matt Makins here. Be well.